All right, my guest today is Lenny Sly. He's the founder and owner of Rogue Warriors Combative Concepts training compound outside of Chicago, Illinois. His Rogue Warriors YouTube channel has over 13,000 subscribers, and Lenny Sly takes his background in Tenshin Aikido and turns it up a few notches to create something unique that should cause anyone interested in self-defense to take notice. Lenny, thank you for joining me here today. It's good to have you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
No, I've really enjoyed your videos. I think the first one I watched was a while back on, you were doing a talk on, what was the name of it? I think it was called Aikido, the way that doesn't work. And I watched it and I kept watching it and it was interesting. And I really enjoyed your past, present, future videos, all those, everything you put out's really awesome. Some people listening, they probably won't know you. So let's give a little introduction. Go ahead and tell me about your start in martial arts and basically how it evolved into the skills you teach now.
Okay. Well, real quick, it's funny that you bring up that first video that you watched where Aikido, the way that doesn't work. It was a part 1 and a part 2 series. If you go to my YouTube channel, you'll see that that's not on there. It's not on that YouTube channel anymore. And for good reason. It caused a lot of controversy. You know, I've had some people that have asked me to put that video back up, and I've really been hesitant about doing it because it's like back then, you know, that video was made over a year and a half ago, and you know, it was like I said, it just caused a lot of controversy with the Aikido world, with people that messaged me and people that responded to that, and I really don't think that people got the big picture of what I was trying to get across with that. But it's interesting that was one of the first videos that you've seen of me, so I appreciate you for watching it. That was a good one.
I watched both of them all the way through. I think I got the gist of it. You weren't necessarily knocking it, but I think I understood what you were saying. But go ahead.
Okay. I started martial arts back when I was 9 years old. I just turned 46 at the end of January. So I've been doing martial arts for a long time. I started my Aikido training back in late 1988 in a basic introduction class at the Chicago Aikikai under Kevin Choate sensei at the time. And that dojo is affiliated with Masugi Satomi Shihan with the ASU Aikido Schools Yeshiva organization. And I got involved with Aikido for a lot of the same reasons I think that most people got involved with Aikido was seeing Steven Seagal's first movie, Above the Law. That opening Aikido scene that was in that movie, I don't know if too many people know that or know this, is that movie set wasn't a movie set. That whole dojo setting, that was actually Steven Seagal's West Hollywood Tenshin Aikido dojo. And anybody that's seen that movie is going to remember that first opening scene when he's doing the Iriminage technique, the clothesline technique to Matsuoka sensei, and how explosive that was. You know, that definitely got my attention right away. I remember when I watched that movie, I watched that scene probably 15 times before I watched the rest of the movie because I was so intrigued by it. And then, you know, of course, I immediately started looking for Aikido schools, and I lived out in the suburbs outside of Chicago. My father actually lived on the north side of the city, so it was like the following weekend, I stopped over at my dad's house, went to his house, pulled out a phone book, and I found the ad for Chicago Aikikai, because obviously back then there was no internet, so it was harder to find things.
Right.
I found the ad for Chicago Aikikai, and it just so happened that the dojo was like literally 3 blocks away from my dad's house. You know, so I drove down there, and it was in a really bad neighborhood. It's kind of funny because that area is just, there's a lot of gangs in that area, and it's just it was just a bad area. I mean, I was like probably one of like 5 white people in the neighborhood walking the streets, and here I am, you know, an 18-year-old kid walking around down there. People must have thought I was crazy in that area. And I tried to open up the door to the school because I remember seeing the times and everything, and it said open, and I tried to open up the door and it wouldn't open, and I just happened to look up, and there was a buzzer that was about, I don't know, it was like about 6.5 feet up off the ground that you had to press. It was a doorbell, basically to get buzzed into school. So I'm like, okay, this obviously is a bad neighborhood if you had to get buzzed into this place. So I walked up the stairs, and the stairs seemed to be forever. It was like 60 concrete stairs up to the 2nd floor. And as I got closer and closer to the top of the stairs, we're hearing these like sonic booms going on. And it's eventually, obviously, when I walked into the main part of the school, I saw all these people training and hitting the mat, and on a second floor of an old building in Chicago that echoes. So it gives you, you're not exactly sure what you're walking into hearing that. So
when I saw introduction into Okemi a bit.
Yeah. And when I saw that, I sat down, watched the class, and I was hooked. Little did I know, though, that this was a traditional form of Aikido. It wasn't what I later sought after, was the Tenshin Aikido. And it wasn't, Steven Seagal's Aikido. It wasn't what I saw.
The Aikikai, you said.
Yeah, the Aikikai style of Aikido. It wasn't what I saw, in the movie Above the Law. And, I joined immediately and started training. And I was a part of that dojo for a very long time, and became very close with Kevin Choate Sensei over the years. And, there's a lot of good stories that we can talk about later on. And I can tell you things that I've experienced with Kevin Choate in conversations. Most people didn't get that opportunity to get that close to him, friend-wise, student-teacher relationship like how I did. He must have obviously saw something in me that he didn't see in other people, I guess. But like I said, I trained in that for a long time. And then obviously when I was a little bit more grown up into adult life, I was able to search out Larry Reynosa. And Larry Reynosa is in Ventura, California. Started training with him in 2000. Basically, I trained with him with seminars and whatnot because obviously I live here in Chicago. It's not like the dojo's an hour down the street. We're talking California versus Illinois here. So I did my best to attend as many seminars as I can with him. And I actually went out to California and trained with him for a week. And I actually stayed with him and stuff. It was a great time. It was definitely a great time. And then in 2007, that's pretty much when I walked away from Aikido, and a lot had to do with that. And I just got frustrated with the teachings and the way how things were taught. So at that point, I, talked with a lot of my senior students, and one of my senior students, Jeff Plumley, who happened to be the very first student that I ever got when I started teaching back in 2000. He's still with me today, as a matter of fact. He and I sat down for a beer one night, and he encouraged me to develop my own form of self-defense, because Aikido is not my only background. I have background in other martial arts, striking arts and stuff like that as well. And that's when I created Combative Concepts, when I started to create Combative Concepts, and went from there, and it's evolved to what it is today.
Certainly it sounds like you paid your dues to get to the point where you are today, especially your skill set. Talk to me about your Combative Concepts approach to teaching self-defense and how it's different from other schools. Okay.
That's a great question, because I get asked that question a lot. Combative Concepts is about real-world self-defense. There's the foundation of Combative Concepts has a lot of Tenshin Aikido principles, and whatnot, all encompassed into one. It's not taught like an Aikido form of martial art, because the movements are cut down. The way how we attack is not traditional per se to Aikikai or Tenshin Aikido, but there's some similarities with this. And it's really about how to handle yourself on the street. And part of the reason why I'm able to do this and teach this is because I have a lot of experience when it comes to street application and real life situations. I was a bouncer for 23 years as a part-time job. That wasn't my full-time job. I was a bouncer for 23 years. I worked in some of the roughest bars in the northern Illinois area. And I've been involved in a lot of confrontations with people. And that usually happens, you're asking somebody to leave because they're over intoxicated, and you can never, ever reason with somebody that's drunk. You just can't. You're asking them to leave because they're over intoxicated. They don't want to go. Some people would be compliant. They would walk out, but then you got, the people that are really nice when they're not drunk, but when the second they're intoxicated, they're a completely different person. It's like a Jekyll and Hyde type of personality. And then they get physical with you, and you have to drag them out. And, it's a job. I got paid well for it. it wasn't really to see how well my skills worked. I looked at this as an opportunity to help protect people with the employment that I had within each establishment that I worked for. And the last place that I worked for was I don't know if you're familiar with the name Toby Keith's I Love This Bar and Grill.
I've been there in Oklahoma.
They've been all over the place.
Yeah, I've been to one of those.
We had 16 stores corporate-wise, and I was the corporate head of security for the Rosemont, Illinois location, which happened to be the top grossing store out of the whole entire company. And, we had a 2,300 person capacity in that store. Every Friday and Saturday night, we were packed. And, alcohol does amazing things to people, especially nice people when they get drunk and, people turn violent. So it's with teaching the whole combative concepts approach. I've used all those years of getting into scuffles with people and was able to develop a system to defend against real world application.
So you were able to take techniques and basically you were able to test them and see what you can do to adjust them to make them more effective during that time.
Correct. You're right. And we have to keep in mind too that this, there have been some bad fights that I've been involved in. I mean, I'm not going to lie about that. And, it's not that I'm ashamed of myself for what I have done to people when it came to that aspect. I had a job and I have to protect people. I have to protect employees. And when somebody's throwing punches at you because they're upset with you because you're asking them to leave, and then it gets physical and they turn around and they start throwing haymakers, you got to do what you got to do to protect yourself. And, but a lot of the stuff that I ended up using in bars were more restraint techniques, pain compliant techniques, wrist lock applications like Sankyo. I've done Sankyo to somebody on the street in a bar. The technique works amazing. Yubidori, grabbing fingers. It's amazing what you can do to somebody when they have no clue what you're going to do.
Right. They're expecting you to throw punches or something.
Yeah. That's what fights are always like that. It's, I want to punch the face. I want to, you want to knock the guy out. People want to hit each other in the face.
Right.
I'm taking that approach to where if I can get into a wrist lock application and stop you dead in your tracks, that for me is, that's a thumbs up. That's what this is all about, is being able to control an assailant. And, goes kind of hand in hand with the traditional Aikido in general. You're using somebody else's energy, their momentum, against them. So as they're attacking you, you want to be able to take that energy that they're giving you, via the punch to the face, and blend with this and use it to your advantage and reverse it on them and apply technique and take them down to the ground to subdue them, to neutralize the attack, right? To incapacitate the threat. That's what you want to be able to do. And that's what I did with the combative concepts is the what if, the yeah, but. You don't hear a lot of martial art instructors talk about that. My previous training, being involved in other styles, it's like, okay, I see what you're showing, but what if this happens? What if that happens? You usually don't get a response from the instructor. The instructor will just say, from my experience, just practice what I just showed. Okay. So when do I get to see something else to combat the situation? Because, when people think that they're training in a martial arts system and they're learning all these techniques, they start to build this encyclopedia of techniques of, I got 75 techniques against a punch. I got 65 techniques off of a grab. I got 75 techniques off of this, that, or whatever. So you build this encyclopedia, but I can tell you this right now, strategy never goes as planned when a fight breaks out because it's always an ambush.
It's fast. Yeah.
I've never seen an honest fight other than the UFC, especially on the street. You can search that in the YouTube search engine all day long and you pull up street fights and stuff. 90% of the time, 95% of the time, you're going to see the ambush where somebody starts to turn one way and then boom, they turn around really quickly and they throw this haymaker or they cheap shot you when you're not looking. It's not like how it was back in the day when I was growing up. You got into a scuffle with one of the kids in the neighborhood. There was no ambushing going on. You were squared up one-on-one, chest to chest, and,
You knew what was happening.
you duke it out. You know, it wasn't you turned your back for a second and, you know, or the other person turns and then, you know, flies back at you with a punch in the face, like how you see all this stuff going on nowadays. You know, it's just the system that I created was more of an approach to real world self-defense and the what if and yeah but scenarios. You know, you can never exclude that stuff because it has to be there, because you never know what's going to happen. You know, you don't know who the person is, and, you know, unless it's obviously your friend, and if you're getting in a fight with your friend, then obviously you might want to pick some new friends to hang out with. But
Yeah.
you know, arguments happen and whatnot, and I've seen friends get into fights over, you know, some pretty stupid things too as well. But you have to be prepared for whatever can happen to you on the street now, especially nowadays with everything that's going on, you know, in the world, and especially here in the United States with protests and everything else. It's you can't walk around like a, you know, a Budweiser Clydesdale horse with blinders on, because you'll be the next person that gets sucker punched.
Yeah, you wear the wrong hat, you're asking for it.
Yeah,
In
exactly.
the right situation, right? Now, you talked a little bit about the UFC being real honest. When you tell most people you're a martial artist, that's kind of the idea formed in people's minds today. You know, they don't typically see the dojo necessarily with the belts and the philosophy thing, but they picture a UFC MMA fighter nowadays. So if people were to find out that your techniques are based in, or at least you have a background in Aikido today, you know, some people might kind of scoff at that because they're thinking of the traditional kind of what dance forms, for lack of a better term. So talk to me about that, and why don't people ask all the time, why don't people see Aikido practitioners in the octagon?
You know, thank you so much for asking me this question. I've been wanting to answer this question on a talk show like this or publicly for probably the past 4 years. Okay? MMA, UFC, that's all sport fighting. As we know, I watch it. I actually love watching UFC fights. I think it's great entertainment. Those guys are phenomenal athletes. I mean, the training that they go through to get into the shape that they're in, to, you know, fight 3 5-minute rounds, that, you know, and grapple and striking and everything else, that's amazing. You know, we do have a lot of backlash from the UFC and MMA guys about Aikido being a joke, and Aikido doesn't work. And obviously, Steven Seagal did not do us any justice with that when he was doing so-called training with Anderson Silva and
Yeah.
whatever that karate guy is, Machida. And it's like, you know, honestly, it's this is going to sound bad, but I wish I could have went right through the video screen and slapped Seagal right in the face when he was doing that, because that was just stupid. That was stupid. It was a publicity stunt, so people would look at him and, you know, he wanted to take credit for Machida doing a front kick and knocking some guy out or whatever it was. Seagal wasn't the inventor of a front kick. Come on, let's get real here.
It didn't work out for him.
Yeah, it's just it did more harm to him than good, in my opinion.
No, it did, yeah.
Because then, you know, that the UFC guys, because I've watched other videos that didn't include Steven Seagal in these UFC videos with some of these guys, and they're talking smack about Seagal left and right. Dana White talks smack. Bas Rutten was talking smack about Seagal. Is Seagal a legitimate Aikido master? Absolutely he is. He's also 64 years old, 65 years old right now. He definitely does not have the same spark that he did back in the day, you know, in the late 80s, you know, mid to late 80s, when the guy was in his prime, as far as I'm concerned. The reason why Aikido, in my opinion, and this is pretty common sense wise, this doesn't take a lot really to understand. If you look at the rules and regulations of the UFC, there is no small joint manipulation.
You know, the grabbing.
There's no wrist locks. There's no finger locks. There's none of that stuff that's allowed in the UFC. Now we have to ask ourselves why. You know, you have tape. Your hands are taped up. You got gloves on. You can still pull off a Kotegaeshi. You can still pull off a Yubidori, a finger grab, and actually it would be more effective because of the fact that now there's resistance having gloves on. That's not going to help you with the application. It's actually going to take the slack out of the technique and make the technique work even more effectively. Okay? in my opinion, the reason why is because these wrist lock applications will end a fight within seconds. Okay? You practice Aikido, correct?
Yeah, a little. I've done a little bit past couple of years.
Okay, so you know what Nikyo feels like.
Yeah, it hurts your wrist, and
How effective is it?
it puts me down on my knees. I mean, that's pretty much what you do.
Within seconds, right?
You're right away. Yeah.
Yeah. So you see how these guys that and don't get me wrong, I also love Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I think that stuff is awesome. You see how long it takes to put somebody, like when they're doing the arm bar, when they're on the back and they're applying an arm bar, and these people are fighting it. People have gotten their elbow snapped from that. Yeah. How long does it take for somebody to tap out?
Once it's applied, it's pretty quick.
Well, it's quick, but it's not instant.
I think they take it to the point where the pain can be handled by them, and then and that's when they tap out. Yeah.
Now with the Nikyo application, how fast do you tap when that's applied?
That go right to my knees. Yeah.
Immediately, it's applied immediately. The pain is excruciating. It's immediate application. It's immediate response. There's no small joint manipulation in UFC, and obviously for good reason, because these fights would end a lot faster once they got into a grappling situation. If you can grab fingers and you can grab into a wrist, obviously you have to train yourself to be able to protect yourself from being punched when you're going for this wrist lock application. I've watched so many fights where it goes to a grappling situation. I'm like, oh man, if they could have used a Nikyo there or a Yubidori or a Sankyo, that could have totally changed the tables on this whole entire fight and possibly ended it. Another thing, you ever see anybody doing standing arm locks, elbow locks, joint locks? No, you don't. You don't see any arm pins. All the striking applications are, pretty much boxing and Muay Thai.
Yeah.
Never see any type of hand deflections that are being used off of some of these punches. And you can train to use Tenshin Aikido's hand deflections in an MMA application. You just have to be quick about it. You have to be able to enter in. You have to be able to move. A lot of these guys, I think, plus I don't think these guys really know what Aikido is all about. I mean, Aikido comes from Daitoru Aiki Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah.
Aikido is just not something that was dreamed up by sensei Morihei Ueshiba, just like combative concepts wasn't just dreamed up by Lenny Sly.
No, he adjusted those techniques.
Yeah, there's a foundation in Aikido, just like Aikido's, original origin comes from Daitoru Aiki Jiu-Jitsu, which was a samurai combative hand-to-hand battlefield-tested combat system. Right there, that speaks for itself. There were strikes involved. There were kicks involved. A lot more devastating than Aikido. And, obviously Sensei liked that. He was actually a 10th degree black belt in Daitoru Aiki Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah.
Very high-ranking guy in that system. And when he developed Aikido, how they talk about the love, peace, and harmony aspect of it?
Sure.
There's a really good article that was written. It was an interview with Masugi Satomi Sensei. And if I can find it, I'll forward it to you. It's a great article, and he talks about the conversations that only 3 of Sensei's senior students were ever privy to. And Satomi Sensei was one. I believe Chiba Sensei was another, and I can't remember the third sensei. But these three high-ranking senseis were privy to this conversation of Sensei, and Sensei told them about what the purpose of Aikido was about. And he uses the word koppo. Koppo means, like koppo jitsu means bone breaking, bone smashing. And that article was really interesting to me, because it's like all these years, it's always been this, fluff Aikido where it's like you barely touch somebody and they go flying all over the place. And it just was that, like what you said, that dance-like style of Aikido. And the truth behind it was this Aikido, this form of Aikido that Sensei created, the whole art was really about evolving to real world times, to modern day times. And Sensei died, April 26th, 1969. And I actually just talked about this in a YouTube video that I made today. And when he died, his Aikido died. You know, because if he was still alive today, do you think that Aikido would be like it is right now? I don't.
Might have would have progressed differently. I mean, he said himself that there's no real form to it, but that it would evolve.
It definitely would have evolved, and I think it would be, for a lack of better words, I think it'd be a lot more devastating than what it is right now, and how it's perceived. You know, and it's just it's interesting. The philosophy, I get the philosophy, but the whole love, peace, and harmony thing, I think when you read the article, you're gonna take from that what I took from it, and I think O Sensei's vision wasn't about love, peace, and harmony for the world. I think it was more for the individual, the student. You know, to have peace within yourself. God help you if you have to use this to defend yourself. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's interesting.
You have peace within yourself after you hurt somebody that's attacking you. You know, and believe it or not, I still get people today that comment on videos that will say, you know, there's a way to do this without using violence, and there's a way to do this without, you know, having to be this hard. Really? There is? Yeah. Okay. I don't know what world you're living in, but last time I checked, it's 2017, and the world doesn't really look like a very nice place. And if somebody's attacking me and I'm with my wife and I'm with my daughter, I have a responsibility to my family, and that's to be able to take care of them.
Yeah, oftentimes you hear people talk about Aikido as they define it actually as a martial art where you don't have to harm the other person. Now in the dojo, you're practicing, you take ukemi. If you do this on the streets, on the pavement, they don't know how to do that. So I mean, even if you did the technique properly and don't intend to hurt them, I mean, when they fall, or it's probably going to hurt them somehow. I mean, in the dojo, it might not hurt you if you know what you're doing, how you take it, but it's probably a different thing on the street. You probably will hurt them even with those techniques.
There's a good chance that you probably would hurt them, but you know, if you have something that's all about the love, peace, and harmony, I don't know. I think because of the way how it's been taught for so many years, and the approach of that was to have people love everybody. So obviously, somebody's trying to attack you. You're gonna blend with the attack, and you're gonna take them down to the ground to where hopefully you're gonna convince them that this is a losing battle. No, that's just gonna piss that person off, and that person's gonna get back up, and they're gonna pounce on you like a lion.
Right.
You know, they're not going to give you a second thought. They're going to keep coming after you. The only way to handle violence is with violence. End of story. Martial arts is painful. Martial arts is about protecting yourself from violence. That's one part of it. There's a philosophy. There's a spiritual side. There's all of those things as well. You know, and it's all up to the individual as well. If you want to be that, you know, loving, peace, and harmonious individual that walks down the street, that pretty much tells me that you're going to be walking in fear for your whole entire life. You know, I don't walk in fear. You know, I mind my own business. I don't start trouble with anybody. Anybody starts trouble with me, I'm prepared for that. You know, I have to be prepared for that. A couple years ago, when I didn't have a daughter and I didn't have a wife, it wouldn't have mattered to me. But now I have a responsibility to protect myself so I can provide for my family. What happens if something happens to me? Fortunately for my wife, she's a stay-at-home mom, so she doesn't have to go to work. I provide for her and provide for my daughter. She doesn't have to go to work. I do it. So if something happens to me, then what happens to her? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I take it from a whole different approach, and I think that's where Satomi Sensei was coming from in that article, because it's almost like the dark side of Aikido, and nobody wants to touch the dark side of Aikido because of O Sensei's philosophy. But I don't really think everybody understood O Sensei's philosophy, especially Westerners. I don't think people here in the United States really understood O Sensei's philosophy. And I'm no expert on this, but this is what my take is. This is what I got from it. You know, and I can also tell you this, that 99% of the Aikido population, especially the senseis that are out there, especially in the United States, have never been in a fight in their life where they had to use Aikido to seriously defend themselves or their loved ones or somebody else that couldn't protect themselves. I'd be willing to bet money on it. Okay? Because I can tell you this, Kevin Choate Sensei once told me he's never been in a fight, ever. He's never used his Aikido, ever. That's just like going to a gym and having a fat guy personal train you. How do you believe in that? You got some guy that's 250 pounds, 300 pounds of chewed bubble gum, and he's going to teach you and train you on how to get into shape? That's kind of weird, don't you think?
No, that's a really interesting statement you made and point. Now, typically in Aikido, a lot of people look at the demos and such, and they see it as almost people say, "Oh, the guy's cooperating with them," since they're not actually like in a sparring match or anything like that. In the Tenshin Aikido randoris, obviously there's a stark difference between the traditional Aikidoists and the Tenshin randoris. They're basically trying to take you down. They'll punch you, whatever they have to do to take you down. There's 3 guys coming at you. Tell me a little bit, since this involves the training, real world, like you're talking, of the Tenshin or the Aikido that you might do, the randoris, how they differ from the traditional side.
Okay.
Because this is the Aikido training in the dojo, since you mentioned it.
That's another great question. Thank you for asking me. The difference between the two, from my experience, because I've done both. In the traditional randori, like I said, go to the search bar on YouTube and look up randori, Aikido randori. I believe there's quite a bit of videos that are up there. The majority of stuff that you're going to see is traditional Aikikai style, Iwama style, Yoshinkan. You know, those things, those type of organizations, you're going to find those type of randoris. And it's, let me make this statement first. I'm not trying to bash Aikido. I love Aikido, period. It doesn't matter what style it is. It kind of goes against the first video that I made with Aikido, the way that doesn't work. I've always loved Aikido. I'm very passionate about it. My goal is I want people to learn Aikido in a more practical sense to where they can protect themselves. I'm not trying to discredit what they've done all these years and the high-level ranking black belts that they've gotten and things of that nature. I think they've been misled down the rabbit hole, so to speak, that this stuff is going to protect you learning it that particular way. If you're not learning it from a practical standpoint and you're learning the dance form of it, when you have to use this practically, you're going to get smoked. Because people on the street don't fight fair. Criminals do not think like you and I do. They don't.
No.
Completely different mindset. People that are bullies that go and pick fights, they don't think like you and I do. They will cheap shot you in a heartbeat to get the upper hand. And Aikido people traditional Aikido people, I don't necessarily think that they realize that. I think the number one technique that Aikido people use, in real life situations is Zanshin, awareness. They're walking down the street and they see possibly trouble at the street corner. They're going to cross the street and continue to walk down the street on the other side of the street to avoid.
It's awareness.
Yeah, to awareness, to avoid a confrontation. I'm going to walk right through that. Okay, because I don't care. I'm going to walk right through that. And if you give somebody respect, if you're let's just say, for the sake of conversation, there's just a bunch of gangbangers on the street corner and they're eyeballing you as you're walking up. Okay, you give them respect, they're going to give you respect back. I mean, obviously, if they want to jump you, they're going to do it.
You're less of a target, even maybe that way.
Yeah, it's if you walk down the street with confidence, people can see that. It's not that you're walking down the street like a tough guy, but if you walk down the street with confidence, there's a difference. If you're looking for trouble, you're going to get trouble. If you mind your own business, but you're confident about your skills and ability, then, that's going to show. And I think a lot of people don't really see that part of it. But the randori setting, like I said, I still train in Aikido. I don't teach regular Aikido classes. Like the Tenshin Aikido classes as a part of the curriculum at my dojo. I teach combative concepts. Obviously, the videos that I do with YouTube are heavily based Aikido videos, especially the past 20 of them have been really all about, Aikido and practical application of Aikido. Yeah. And that's for good reason. and I can explain that later. But the randori, in a sense, the traditional side of it, it's more of like a dance form. You're doing the country two-step as you're doing this. No one's attacking you seriously. It's they're not trying to drag you down. They're not trying to grab onto your gi and then the other two guys, jump on top of you and it's like smear the queer without the ball. That's not what they do. It's about harmonizing with your attackers, from what my opinion, from what I've seen and what I've done with it. And there's really no true application to technique. It's about avoidance. It's about getting out of the way of the attackers. But when the attackers aren't coming at you, realistically, there's no intent behind the attack. When you see some videos on YouTube and on social media, on Facebook, of these fights that happen, it's never just one-on-one. The second the guy's down, his friends jump in. I'm sure you've seen videos like that. I've seen a ton of videos like that. It's never a fair fight in the real world, especially nowadays. It's you get into a fight with somebody, the second somebody gets the upper hand and he's with two other people, usually those other people are going to jump in and they're going to throw their cheap shots in there as well. And it's just,
kind of real world randori.
Yeah, it's the difference between that and Tenshin randori. You got three guys in traditional Aikido. The three guys surround you, kind of create a triangle around you, and you're the guy in the middle. Randori with Tenshin Aikido, you got three guys on the other mat, at the end of the mat, sitting in seiza. You're sitting in seiza,
and the sensei,
and the sensei screams out Hajime, right? That means begin, attack. Those three ukes jump up and they come at you 110%, and their job is to take you down to the ground. That is it. Their job is to take you down to the ground, whatever it takes to take you down to the ground. The beginning of the randori, the dayashi, that's the initiation, the initial movement. That's where your hand deflections, your taisabaki comes into place, is that you need to get out of the way when that starts. When they're right up on you, you got three guys coming at you, and they're getting ready to Brian Urlacher you. They're not going to run up and tag you. They're there to mow you down. That is their job, is to take you down, and you have to stop them from doing that. And I've been involved countless numbers of times with what I like to describe as the beatdown randori, because that's exactly what it is. It's a beatdown randori, because the second they get you down to the ground, it's not, okay, play's over, whistle's blowing, get back up, do it again. No. Your job is you have to get back up onto your feet. Now, this is what I was taught, and this makes the most amount of sense. And I give all the credit and props and everything to Larry Reynosa with this, because Larry Reynosa's randoris were absolutely freaking brutal. And the randoris that I participated in with George Angulo sensei were just the same. They were brutal. There was nothing nice about them at all. I took my Nidan test under Larry Reynosa back in 2006 in St. Louis at a seminar. And my Nidan test was 45 minutes long, nonstop, 45 minutes. And the way how he conducts a test is show me 5 techniques off of a Yoka Minucci strike, which is a strike to the side of the head. Show me 5 techniques from a Shomanuchi strike, which is a strike to the top of the head. 5 techniques from Kowski, which is a punch to the face. And he would say, you show me 5 techniques and you're controlling the uke, and you're showing me 5 different techniques, I'll move on to the next set. He never did that with me. It was 10 techniques off of each attack. It was ridiculous. I mean, it was just
Then you end it with the randori.
Well, you end it with Nihi Toriwaza first. Mm-hmm. Nihi Toriwaza is when 2 people grab you, 1 on each arm. And he does this as a method to completely suck out whatever energy you have left.
Yeah.
You have no energy left. And then he puts you up for a randori. Well, what was interesting about my test is that probably about 5 minutes or so before I did Nihi Toriwaza, on my right foot, my pinky toe, my small toe, got broken. It was dislocated. My toe was almost at a 90-degree angle from my foot.
Yeah, they're trying to hurt you.
What's that?
Yeah, they're actually trying to get you. They're trying to hurt you, and you broke things.
Yeah, and well, it was also done on wrestling mats. Wrestling, because it was done, it was a seminar, and it was at a school in a gymnasium, and the wrestling mat. Wrestling mats are horrible to practice Aikido on because it's rubber, it's not vinyl, so your feet don't slide well. So my toe was broken, it was dislocated, and I looked down at my foot, and I just felt all this pain in my foot. I looked down and I saw that. I'm like, oh my God. And I bent over and I like kind of pulled my toe back into place, and there's Sensei, Renosa Sensei, going, what's wrong? I'm like, Sensei, I think I broke and dislocated my toe. Worry about it later. Keep going. I'm sitting there going, I'm like, oh my God, are you serious? Didn't let me get off the mat and buddy taped the toe. Nothing. As you can imagine, the pain continued and it intensified as each second went by. I felt like I had my foot in a bucket of hot lava. Did the knee hitori waza, and then I had to go down into seiza. Think about that. You have to go down on your knees to do randori.
Yeah.
I was in so much freaking pain that I couldn't get down in seiza and be comfortable. And then when he screams out hajime, you got to hop up to your feet. And when you're in pain, it's, that's hard to do. It's hard to manage. I got killed on the randori.
How long did you last there?
I had to do the randori 7 times.
That time?
7 times I had to do the randori on that test.
Wow.
7 times. And the first one, I was able to fend people off for probably a good 8 seconds before I got slammed to the ground.
Yeah.
The second one, pretty much the same. As I progressed with the number of repetitions of randori, it was almost to the point where the second that I got up, I was being tackled. There was a couple of times where I didn't even get into full seiza before he screamed out hajime. Before I was actually to get down in seiza and prepare, I'd be getting onto my knees, hajime, like I'm not even down yet.
Yeah.
And then I'd have to, switch gears, get back up on my feet, and I would get blasted. And the great thing about it was Terry Kasurek, who's a really good friend of mine and who is a former student of Larry Renosa's as well, he was there for that seminar. And he told me that he had a conversation with Renosa after the test. And Larry said to him, he goes, I did everything that I possibly could to find a reason to fail Lenny. And I couldn't find one reason.
You got your knee done.
I got my knee done. But the moral behind this whole story here's the difference. Okay, this is what everybody's been waiting to hear come out of my mouth. Here's the difference. Aikido, randori, aikikai style is about avoidance, about blending with the attacker and whatnot. No serious attack, no intent behind the attack, no smear the queer without the ball, nothing like that. Tenshin randori is all about the beat down. It's about taking you out, okay? And the thing that makes us different with us compared to the other Aikido people in the world is that our mindset is we accept this. We know we're being taken down to the ground. It's a given. I've seen Renosa Sensei get dragged down to the ground. You're going down to the ground. I don't care who you are. It's going to happen. Eventually, someone's going to get a hold of you, and the other 2 people are going to jump on you. Unless you're, Ronnie Coleman, 8-time, 9-time Mr. Olympia, you're not going to be able to hold 3 people that weigh over 600 pounds on top of you when they have you. It's going to be hard to still be standing when that happens. The thing is, the mindset, you're going down on the ground. We accept that. This is the difference. It's how you get back up is what matters. How does that apply to real world? This is how it applies. On the street, if you have that fire in you with the Tenshin randori and you're practicing the Tenshin randori, the dojo is the place where you can make these mistakes and you can hone your skills and you can become very, very, very good at this, right? That's where you learn about the blood, sweat, and tears of training. That's where you perfect your technique. On the street, you have one chance to get this right, and it's about survival. If you give up in the dojo in a randori, if you quit, you want to know what that tells me, what that tells Renosa Sensei and Gulo Sensei? That means that you are going to lie down and die in the real world if this happens to you. You're going to give up. You're going to become another statistic, and you're going to be a victim.
All right. Now, when you get on
You don't ever want to give up.
Right, you don't want to give up. You don't want to, especially if it's just one person. I mean, you've got three guys coming at you.
But think about that. If you can handle three people in a Tenshin style randori, okay, and I've done it. I've got to that point where I can handle three people in a beatdown to where I don't get taken down. And, the rule of thumb is if you can stay up for 10 or 15 seconds, you're good. And 10 or 15 seconds seems like a lifetime when you're on the receiving end of a randori, a Tenshin style randori.
Yeah.
But if you can stay up 10 or 15 seconds, that's awesome against three people. Out on the street, if it's one person, that's going to be a cakewalk. Yeah. You're going to handle that person with no problems. If you can handle three people on a beatdown, one person is going to be a breeze. It's going to be a piece of cake. Exactly.
Now, on the issue of practicality, you train for real world situations. A lot of people talk about standing martial arts as lacking what you'd find in like Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, where of course it's basically they try to get you on the ground. Does your training have any ground techniques?
Good question. Yes, it does. And I will openly admit this. I do not have any formal BJJ experience. Okay? I have no problem admitting that. Most Aikido people don't. Because most of the techniques, when you go to the ground, it's, that's Suwari Waza. That's not actually grappling, Jiu-Jitsu type style.
It's on your knees type thing.
You're on your knees. It's part of the samurai tradition. Those type of skills. Our goal is to not get punched, grabbed, kicked, or taken to the ground. Those are four main principles. And those are principles that have been instilled by me, by Renosa Sensei, by Angulo Sensei. It's a staple in our Tenshin Aikido system. You don't get punched, grabbed, kicked, or taken to the ground. And if you do get punched, grabbed, kicked, or taken to the ground, you do it on your own terms, not on somebody else's terms. Okay, so if you're going to go down to the ground, and there's sometimes that you can't avoid that from being taken down to the ground, but you have to be able to manage those situations and not get taken down to the ground. The techniques that we do at that, we still apply, wrist lock applications and whatnot, because we don't have that UFC MMA regulations that we have to follow by. There are no rules in my dojo when it comes to technique, combative concepts. We don't have rules. Okay, and this is not a sport fighting system. This is, a system to teach you self-protection for real world scenarios. Now, I have seen a lot of fights in my day where people get the upper hand and they take somebody down on the ground. And, why is that? People do that because some people have a wrestling background. Some people have, grappling backgrounds. And that's how they get the upper hand, is by taking you down to the ground. So if you can't do, stand-up fighting, boxing, Muay Thai or whatever, or just street fighting in general, and you're going against somebody that you get into a fight with that has a wrestling background, chances are that guy's going to take you down on the ground where he's more comfortable at, and the fight's going to go from there. There's a lot of practical applications with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but you have to think of it from this standpoint too. We talked about this earlier in this interview, that it's never a one-on-one situation. You take somebody down on the ground and you have wrestling skills or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu skills in itself, grappling skills, and that guy has two other friends. Do you think that they're going to sit there and watch you annihilate their friend? No, they're going to jump on you.
Right, as soon as you start choking them out.
Yeah, they're going to kick you in the head. They're going to stomp on your, they're going to kick you in the back. They're going to kick you in the ribs, because, unless they hate their friend, I really wouldn't call that friends, because I can tell you right now, none of my friends would ever, if I got taken down on the ground and I start getting beat on, none of my friends, if they were there with me, would let that happen.
They won't just be cheering you on, yeah.
Yeah, they wouldn't be saying, "Come on, Lenny, come on, you can get up, come on, remember Tenshin Randori, get up or you're going to die, get up." It's not like that, I'm not going to get taken down on the ground. I'm not going to let myself get taken down on the ground, because I'm going to, obviously use principles that I've incorporated in my training, like distance, balance, and timing. Obviously, I'm going to keep proper distance from somebody. If somebody bum rushes me, there's things that I'm going to do that I'm going to try to avoid that I'm going to apply to avoid that. And Yubidori is one of those techniques that are extremely effective, because people don't grab you with closed fists. They grab you, and they have to, in order to grab you, they have to open up their fingers. They have to open up their hands to grab onto you. That there is my green light. The second somebody tries to grab me, obviously hand deflections play a very important role there. You know, don't get punched, don't get grabbed. How does that work? You use your, you know, your tai sabaki, your te sabaki, your hand deflections to avoid that. You can, at that point, slap on a yubidori where you're grabbing 2 fingers. You can control somebody by 2 fingers. And if you're doing the technique the right way, it's extremely effective. It's ridiculously effective. If you look at, sure, you ever heard of Wally J, Small Circle Jiu-Jitsu?
No.
You've never heard of him?
Oh
my God. Go on YouTube and look him up. He's called the Professor. And he was popular before BJJ was popular. He does a lot of finger grab techniques, small joint manipulation. That's why it's called small joint jiu-jitsu, because it's about small joint applications. Watch some of his stuff. It looks a lot like Steven Seagal's Yubidori techniques. I actually, and it's never been confirmed, but I actually believe that Seagal got the Yubidori techniques from his form of jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, it's interesting.
It's really interesting because I actually have several videos on Wally J's system. And when I sit back and I watch these things, I'm like, God, that's the same exact stuff that we're doing. That's identical. Literally, it's like identical. I mean, obviously, Seagal incorporated his splash of Aikido to it, to where it was more of that accepting the person's attack and energy and using it against them. But the application of technique is virtually identical to Wally J's Small Circle Jiu-Jitsu. From what I can see, that's what it looks like to me. And I'm a pretty good judge of technique when I see it, because it looked exactly like what we were doing. And it's interesting. But, you know, the whole ground thing, we do ground fighting. It's minimal. Okay. It's minimal because I train people to not get taken down on the ground. But then there you go again. There's the what if and yeah, but.
Yeah.
And if that happens, then that's great, because that's a learning experience for everybody, especially my newer students, because they'll say, well, you know, I just got taken down on the ground, so what do I do now? Perfect. That just opened up a huge line of communication here. Now we can talk about this, where we can go. And the techniques are really endless at that point, because we're not held to restrictions. We're not held to illegal techniques. Yeah. You can't do this, you can't do that, because on the street, there's no rules on the street.
There's no flow chart.
Yeah, there's no flow. There's no referee that's going to pop out of a manhole cover and say, violation, you did that wrong.
Yeah.
You lost the fight. No, because you want to know what? In the real world, okay, you come in second place, you're not getting a trophy. Okay? It's real. You could end up dead. You know, in the real world, there's no trophies. You know, there's no referees. There's no rules to fighting. You know, back in the day, you know, there was a certain, you know, honor code that you didn't do. Obviously hitting guys in the groin and stuff like that. You know what? Nowadays, it's whatever goes on the street to survive, because anybody will do anything to anybody to win. So it is what it is. You know, I haven't shown videos on this, but I do a lot of like eye gouging techniques and skin pinching techniques, especially like in the guillotine choke, side choke, side headlock choke. You know, and I probably should do a couple videos on that so people can see it. But the eye gouge is, in my opinion, Edgar, is probably the most devastating and most practical martial art technique you can ever do.
Poke him in the eye.
Is the eye gouge. Think about it. Okay? Remember the Three Stooges?
Yeah.
How effective was that when Mo would sit there and poke Larry and poke Curly in the eyes all the time?
As long as he didn't put his arm up flat, it was pretty painful.
Yeah. there was a UFC fight with Brock Lesnar. And this was years ago. He was fighting one of the guys from Brazil. I cannot remember what his name was. But I was watching that fight live, and it was an unintentional thumb to the eye.
This was after the rules of the eye gouging?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, Brock Lesnar wasn't involved with this, you know, back in the 90s. You know, this is probably about maybe, I don't know, like maybe 8 years ago or something. That first stint that when he was in the UFC, when he was first involved with it, it was an unintentional thumb eye gouge. And you want to know what happened? Brock Lesnar, 300 pounds, however much that guy is, how much he weighs. The guy's a tank. I mean, the guy's huge. He's a freaking dump truck. he dropped down to his knee in a split second and grabbed his eye. He dropped down to his knee. The ref stopped the fight. Obviously, he was given 5 minutes to recover. There was a point deducted from the other guy. You saw the replay of it. It wasn't intentional. It was an unintentional thumb eye gouge. That's sport fighting. Let's put that in real world perspective now. Female self-defense, right? A guy comes up, does a double hand strangulation choke to a woman's neck. What is usually the first thing that somebody's going to do? They're going to start trying to break that grab, because once your oxygen cuts off, you go into panic mode. If you can't breathe, right? Most people don't think, oh, I can't breathe, so I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. People start to go into panic mode if they're not trained, and they try to break that hold around someone's neck, around their neck so they can breathe. You know how fast you can have that thumb eye gouge, because it's usually not stretched out like Frankenstein choke. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's usually close. So a woman can get her thumb, her index finger, middle finger, whatever finger she wants. And most women have a little bit longer nails than guys. And she takes that finger and digs it into that man's eye socket with intention to cause great bodily harm. That guy is going to let go of you faster than he would let go of an M80 firecracker in his hand that was lit.
Right. The idea, self-defense techniques for self-defense to save your life.
Exactly.
Protect yourself and your family, and not worrying as much about that guy.
Yeah, that technique is extremely effective. And when I've had women come in the dojo and they've talked to me about self-defense, I usually say this to them. I'm like, you want to know what the number one technique is that would save you in any type of close encounter situation? Would be an eye gouge. And they look at me and I'm like, here, this is where you can relate. We can't relate. You and I can't relate. Or maybe we can. I don't know. You decide on that. I go, do you wear mascara?
I don't.
Yes, I do. You have an applicator that you put that on with, right? Have you ever poked yourself in? Oh my God, yes, that stings so bad. I don't know about you, Edgar, but I don't wear mascara, so I'm going to take her word for it. So if she's poked herself, if a particular woman has poked herself in the eye with her mascara applicator and that stings, what do you think a finger would do to a human being?
Right. So they can relate to it a little bit more than I guess.
They can relate to it a lot more. And it's interesting how I came up with that. Because the second that I say that, they're like, oh, yeah, I totally see how that would be effective. Now, did that just kill a sale for me? I'm not a salesperson, possibly. But I just gave somebody, if they walked out of there, I just gave them with a very valuable self-defense tip, and that is eye gouge. If you're being choked, especially if it's from a frontal choke, and you can get an eye gouge, absolutely. That will stop them dead in their tracks because, hey, they're never going to see it coming. No pun intended. Get it?
And that ref won't be coming out to stop it.
Yeah, they're never going to see that coming. And that might buy them enough time, especially if they do it. Because, when you're scared for your life, people do amazing things. You get attacked and you're in fear for your life. You are in clear and present danger of receiving imminent battery or bodily harm or death. People do amazing things. And conversations like this that I've had with women, I might have saved someone's life one day just by telling them that simple technique. They might have a flashback to that day and say, oh, finger grab, boom. It could be against, an estranged boyfriend or, a domestic battery type of situation. There's a lot of that going on nowadays too. So it's like, it's really all about self-defense for me. I use the Aikido to get my name out there so people can see what I'm doing. And I think I've done a pretty decent job with that. And obviously I grabbed your attention, which is great. I've grabbed a lot of other people's attention and it seems like people are really liking what I'm doing. And that's good because it's, for all intents purposes, I really want to help the Aikido community out because I know there's a lot of Aikido people out there that are stuck doing what they're doing because they don't have access to, a more real world practical application dojo or sensei. And, it's unfortunate there's not more of us out there, that teach the Tenshin style form of Aikido, especially with, the mindset of teaching it from a practical application and being able to show, different ways on how to apply this other than the textbook way, so to speak. And, that's why when I follow through a technique, I'm following through a technique. You know, I have some great students that have allowed me over the years to test my own skills and perfect my technique. And ukemi in itself is an art form. And, you know, when you have somebody that can take exceptional ukemi, you don't worry about what they're doing. You worry about applying technique, and that allows you to be able to apply technique harder and using your body more, and, you know, and advancing through technique and deploying power through your technique, and knowing the fact that you have an uke that can take a hard fall and get back up and smile at you and go, man, that was good. that was real good. I mean, you look at Chris is the guy with the bandana in my earlier videos. I can't even tell you how many times I have literally beat the crap out of that guy in class. And because his ukemi is so good that he'll get up smiling at me and he'll be like, wow, dude, that was really good. I mean, Bob's the same way. Frank's the same way. But, you know, Chris was one of those guys where it's like, he lets the technique happen. You know, it doesn't matter what it is. He lets you follow through. He's giving himself to you for you to perfect your technique. And I think a lot of training that's done out there, it's people take the ukemi, and obviously you take the ukemi so you can get back up and you can do it again. And, you know, you were talking about this earlier with somebody that would fall on the street. They might not necessarily get back up. And, you know, no one's going to take, you know, hard break falls and stuff on the street when they're not trained. They don't know how to do that. So that obviously what you're practicing in the dojo and how beautiful the techniques look, that's those techniques are not going to be painting the same picture if you have to apply this in real world settings against somebody that's trying to hurt you. It's not going to look that pretty. It's for me, it's going to look pretty because they're going to fall down really hard, and it's not going to look like the dojo, and it's going to be effective, and they're not going to get back up. They're going to sit down and probably think about getting back up, or they're going to be seriously hurt, and I'm going to call the cops, or I'm going to walk away, depending on the situation.
Right, and those ukes help you train as well, because it allows you to follow through with the techniques closer to what might be real world.
Exactly, and that's the other thing that I don't think a lot of Aikido people, especially the people that watch the YouTube videos, those are all compliant attackers. Everything's compliant. Well, here's the thing with that too is I've used this approach with people. Okay, have you ever played fast pitch baseball before?
Yeah.
Okay, you have, but you didn't. The first time you ever picked up a bat, the first time you ever played baseball, period, did you have somebody throw an 80 or 90 mile per hour pitch at you?
First time you probably played T-ball or something.
Yeah, no, you've never had that. No one has ever had that, where they stand there with a bat for the first time and somebody throws this rocket at you. You're going to be like, whoa, you're going to back off because you're not expecting that, right? So in order for you to learn, you have to learn how to crawl before you can walk before you can run before you can sprint. There's methods in how these techniques are taught. You have to learn the form. You have to learn the technique. You have to know what it feels like. You have to know how to be able to apply it, you know, receive it, and everything else. You have to understand why this works the way that it does. And for Westerners, especially men, a lot of us don't have the time and patience for that. We want to know what, why, and how right now. How does this work? Why does this work? I don't understand how this works. This is freaking me out. I don't understand how this could possibly work. That's the problem. You're thinking too much. Stop thinking about the what if and why and how it works. When you look at women that practice Aikido, they don't ever question anything. They are phenomenal at mimicking movement. It's about mimicking the movement. You can figure out why and how it works later. Right now, you need to learn the form. You need to learn the movement.
Have a foundation.
The foundation, and get that down. All that other stuff can be explained to you later. And quite honestly, through your training, you're going to be answering your own questions by learning how to do this as you get better. And the application of technique with, the whole concept with the baseball bat thing is, learning how to actually apply these techniques. And the problem with the Aikido world is they don't practice the techniques to where they're applied in a practical application. Okay, it's all walking through, and it's the love, peace, and harmony side. It's it's a practical application that really matters, in my opinion, and that's why I do what I do. It's like I want people to better themselves with Aikido, and there's a lot of Aikido people out there that have reached out to me that says, I don't have any other options. I'm kind of stuck here. And granted, I'm not affiliated with the Aikikai anymore, obviously, because I left back in 2007. I do my own thing. I promote people the way how I want to promote. I'm not going to sit. There's no point in me putting people through the Aikikai because the Aikikai doesn't know any of my students. They don't know them. If I was affiliated through the Aikikai, I would have those type of documents to where I can send somebody in. I can send my dog's paperwork in and say, this is Kobe Sly. He qualified for a Shodan. Here's his money. And then what happens? Boom, there's a stamp and a passport. There's a certificate issued. It gets sent out. And then I take a picture and put it up on social media. Hey, look, my dog is now a black belt in Aikido. Look at that.
Right.
There's once O-sensei died, it turned into a business. It's turned into a business completely. It's all about money making for them. And, there are some great traditional Aikido guys out there. Christian Tissier, I love watching that guy.
Yeah.
Hiroshi Ikeda Sensei sent me a happy birthday on Facebook. And he does it every year. That was another one of my Shihan through ASU back when I was a part of that organization. I love that guy. His Aikido is awesome.
He's off on his own too now.
What's that?
He's off on his own, doing his own thing.
Yeah, he is off on his own, doing his own thing. Frank Duran Sensei, who's from California, I've trained with him a couple times at seminars. I love that guy. He's so personable. He's so approachable. He's so friendly. The first time I ever met him, it was in Southern Illinois, and he obviously noticed me on the mat. And he walked up, and he was smiling and stuff, and we're doing technique, and in between, changing positions where I was the uke from Nage, he walks up, he goes, you're doing that really well. Hi, I'm Frank. I was like, I'm like, yes, Sensei, I know exactly who you are. My name is Len. He said, it's great to meet you, Len. But he addressed himself. He introduced himself as Frank. What Sensei does that?
Sure.
No, I've never met any other Sensei that walked up and said, hey, how you doing? I'm, so, whatever. They don't do that. I mean,
it's that signs of humility that they share. And
Frank Durant Sensei was awesome. He just got promoted to 8th Dan, by the way, back in the beginning of January, and he's retired too, from what I understand. But that, guys like him, and I still have a lot of respect for Larry Reynosa Sensei and Matsuoka Sensei, Haruo Matsuoka Sensei. I mean, that guy is just. It's amazing how humble he is.
Yeah, you clearly have a great respect for Aikido in general, despite how some people might take some of the things that they misunderstood from what you said. It's been with you for your whole life. You've enjoyed it. You obviously love it, and you are helping it to evolve. I enjoy your past, present, future Aikido videos. Those are really interesting. And for those of you who haven't seen those, he takes the traditional style of a technique, demonstrates it, then shows you the Tenshin style, that'd be the present, and then his own application in the future version of it. If anybody hasn't seen Lenny Sly's Aikido past, present, future videos, I encourage them to check it out, as well as his other videos on his Rogue Warriors YouTube channel. Lenny, I've enjoyed speaking with you or hearing you talk for the most part.
I told you I like to talk.
No, it's good. It's good. If people don't want to hear anything I have to say, they want to hear you. But I like presenting these people that I find interesting. They have something to say, and I appreciate you talking with us. Where can people learn more about you if they want to train with you, either in person or online? Where do they go?
RogueWarriorsTraining.com. Basically, you can go to the website. We have an online class section up at the top header. You can click on that. I offer online training with the Tenshin Aikido and the combative concepts as well. It's we've done a lot of work with that. Lately, as I've said, I'm really trying to grow the YouTube channel. So I've been doing a lot of videos with the YouTube channel, especially over the past 2 weeks, and within this next week, I'm trying to post every day. That's what I'm trying to do, and it's been helping, and it's getting that information out there, and I'm starting to get noticed a little bit more. But the online classes, we have like 180 or close to, I think maybe 180 or close to 200 online classes in combination with both the Tenshin Aikido and the Combatives. There's more Tenshin Aikido than there is the Combatives, though. But the combative side is in the process of showing you more of the real world type applications. There's a lot of fundamental skills in each of those. I break everything down. I literally, in the Tenshin Aikido, I show people how to put a belt on properly, because that's a big pet peeve of mine. I walk into a dojo and I see somebody that can't even put a belt on properly. What does it say about the instructor? The instructor doesn't care about, obviously the etiquette part. It's, simple things like that, how to get on and off the mat. Those are entry level things. For people that train with the online classes, I give them these other classes of how to get on and off the mat, how to respect the sensei, things like that. So when they can go and they visit a dojo, they know how to conduct themselves properly, and they don't embarrass themselves by doing something wrong just by stepping on the mat without bowing and things like that.
Right, the basics of etiquette to all the what ifs that we spoke of earlier.
Pretty much. Well, the Tenshin Aikido doesn't have the what ifs. That's more of the Tenshin Aikido platform. But the combative concepts has more of the what if stuff. And I have some offensive knife technique. I do not believe in defensive knife, meaning knife takeaways. That's a whole nother conversation that we'd have to have about that. I just don't believe, my belief with a knife, if somebody pulls a knife on you and you have the ability to escape and run like a cheetah. Get out of there, because a knife does just irreversible damage. Personally, I'd rather be shot than stabbed any day of the week and twice on Sunday, because when you're being stabbed by an attacker, and you could YouTube this and do some research, it's brutal. It is absolutely brutal. I don't wish that upon anybody, obviously, but people have asked me for knife defense techniques, and I'm just like, my best advice to you is run, and run fast.
And stay safe. No, Lenny Sly. He's the founder and owner of the Rogue Warriors Combative Concepts Training Compound. Lenny, I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to talk with me. I appreciate it. Thank you here for being with us.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you, Edgar, for including me on this. I really, really appreciate this.
No, that was great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
You too.
That was Lenny Sly of the Rogue Warriors Training Compound outside of Chicago, Illinois. This has been part 2 in my Discover Aikido series of interviews. Please be sure to watch for more videos on this subject and many more topics. And please subscribe at the Edgar Ortega YouTube channel. Thank you for listening to the Edgar Ortega Radio Show.